All right. Well, the time being 1:01 p.m. on April 11th, 2022, I'd like to call this meeting to order of Kane County's Health Department Executive Director Search Committee. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Shepro.
Present.
Silva.
Silva is here.
Pepe.
Pepe here.
Kenyon. Wallace. Sanchez.
Here.
Give quorum.
Okay. No need for approval of the minutes, obviously. Public comment. Is there anyone? There's no one here in person. Anyone online? I don't see anyone I don't recognize. So we move on to new business. Okay. So today's meeting is going to be fairly simple. We're just going to go through the selection, the process, and approximate timeline. For those of you not here, we have paper copies of 9 applicants, potential candidates for review for you. So if you want the paper copy, it'll be in your mailbox tomorrow if you're coming in for county board. If you would like a digital version of these applications, Ms. Labrillo is happy to send you a digital version, but not everybody likes that. They want the paper copy. So you'll at the very least have that in your mailbox tomorrow. Let's see, I'm going to take over the screen real quick and just go through just a short PowerPoint describing what this process is going to look like and the approximate timeline for us. So if you bear with me 1 second or a few seconds. Where is the share screen?
Shepro, I believe that state law says that no decision can be taken without a PowerPoint first.
Yeah, I think it is required, if not in letter, then at least spirit. So. And there we go. Okay. All right. All right, everyone should be able to see that now. So just a quick primer of where we've been. I did send an email out to everyone, but just wanted to cover it in open session. Per the county code, Madam Chair, or whoever the chairman of the board is, or chairperson of the board, initiates the process for the hiring of any department heads. And she did so. She invited members to serve on this committee, worked in consultation with HR Executive Director Labrillo and myself, distributed resumes to members of the Health Advisory Committee for initial review, and they held a meeting last week to discuss their findings. And 9 candidates were then recommended to Madam Chair, who then decided to recommend all 9 of those candidates to this committee. So today, I'll distribute the materials, go over the process and timeline. Want to start talking about what questions we're going to ask in the interviews. And then we will be asking you all to review these 9 candidates over the course of the next week, so that when we come back next week on the 18th, we'll discuss and trying to bring the list down from 9 to 5 candidates. And out of those 5, we will select ones for an interview, whether all 5 of them we want to interview or just a few.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Shepro, go ahead.
Yes. Did the advisory committee interview any of the candidates, or was they just reviewed resumes?
They reviewed the resumes only. And in the packets with the resumes, at the end of each candidate's packet, there are the sheets that were handed in from the Health Advisory Committee members that have notes that they took, things that they wanted to recognize on the record. There is also the meeting that they held last Monday, I believe it was. Was it Monday? Last Monday, although it's it was closed session only. Members of the board, obviously, but this committee in particular can review the audio files of those meetings. You just have to go to the state's attorney's office to do so. Just like any other closed session, it's always recorded, but only available in person at the state's attorney's office.
At some point, Shepro, again, there will be minutes, but
Yeah, there will be minutes made available as well. So once those are done, I don't know, tomorrow. I'm just kidding. Yeah, those will also be made available to everyone as well. Okay, so then on the 18th, we'll meet, bring it down to 5 people, select who we want to bring in for interview, if not all of them. And then on the 25th, we'll meet and conduct the interviews with some or all candidates. We might not be able to schedule everything out in the same day, but with 5 people, if you figure 45 minutes apiece, we could potentially do them all in one day. We'll have to figure that out when we on the 18th, we'll determine that. And that's another thing we have to talk about is what time we want to have these meetings. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we're going along.
Shepro, again, the goal is to have a recommendation to the chairman by
The end of May.
end of May,
Mid to end of May. That's,
with action by the board at the June
yes.
meeting.
That's the optimistic timeline we're operating on. So going into May on the 2nd, and as you'll notice, these are every Monday, our meetings. We'll try and do them once a week as needed. We'll finish interviews if we have to. Otherwise, if the interviews have been finished, we will then select out of the 5, 2 or 3 that we would like to see moved into a final round for consideration. And then the following week, we will have off. Ms. Labrillo here will host a tour at the Health Department in Aurora for the final 2 or 3 candidates. Health Advisory Committee members will be present if they so choose. The union staff and regular non-union staff will also be present, and I'm informed that AFSCME, the union, has selected who they would like to be at this meeting already. Any internal candidates, if they are in the 2 or 3 that we are considering it towards the end, they will not be present at this staff meeting at the Health Department. This will be an opportunity for the candidates themselves to ask questions of the staff, start to poke around, kick the tires a little bit, and see what they're walking into potentially. Anything that they might be interested in knowing, they'll be able to get those answers, those questions answered at the time. And then afterwards, staff will submit questions and comments to Ms. Labrillo for committee consideration. And then we will meet again the following week on the 16th. We'll review the feedback from HR Executive Director Labrillo and the Health Advisory Committee. And then we will select the final candidate or final candidates for a final review. So if we bring it down and there's 2 people and we're just really on the fence about, we want to bring them in for another round of questions for a deeper dive into some things that we might want to know about them or feedback from them, we'll bring them in. But otherwise, we will have a final candidate at this time. And then either somewhere on the 23rd or the 30th, depending on how all these previous meetings go, we will meet, either finish the interview with final candidates or have a final candidate selected. And then we will have the resolution that we will vote upon in open session and send it up to the county board for recommendation. So that's the tentative schedule. Does anyone have any questions on that at this time? Mr. Shepro, and Madam Chair, you're just walking in. This is all taken from the timeline we had before developed.
And for the record, Mr. Wallace is also joined the meeting a few minutes ago.
Tepe here, will all the meetings be scheduled to be at 1 o'clock?
No, and that's something that we need to determine as a group, what time we would like to meet. Certainly on the days that we do interviews, we would want to meet earlier in the day because they can go on for many hours.
I did have a question.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Shepro, back to you.
Yes. So I was trying to follow the meeting with the, I gather, is it with the entire staff or with union designated staff?
I'll let Ms. Labrillo answer that. She's going to be hosting that.
We don't have the staff yet determined, but there will be a mix of both union and non-union staff, a couple representatives of each to participate in that.
Is this something that is required in any way by the union agreement, or are we just doing this because it looks like a good idea?
It's not required by the union agreement, but they made the request, and I believe Madam Chair has honored that request.
And did I understand that the 2 internal applicants will not be part of that?
They would be
Process.
excluded from that process, yes.
I ask why?
Well, they already work there. I mean, that's one. So this is a way for outside candidates to come
Okay.
in and kind of, see what the organization is like in person, what the building is like, meet some of the staff that they might be working with.
But it
ask
sounded
questions.
to me like it was more than just a tour. It was an interaction and
Um, I-
Madam Chair.
I'm just getting up to speed here.
Can't hear you.
Hi, it's Corinne Pirog speaking. If if it determines that the internal candidates, one or both, are moved up to being one of the final candidates for this opportunity, I believe that they should be given the opportunity to be interviewed as well as the other external candidates would, all equal.
This is for the tour of the health department for the.
And a
final
staff
few.
meet and greet
But
is the
isn't
other
it-
part. It's not really an interview. And they would still be interviewed by the clinical advisory group.
Mhm.
The same as any other applicant would be interviewed by the clinical advisory group. However, they don't need a meet and greet with the staff or a tour of the facility since they already work there.
But there will be some questions asked during the meet and greet that may be appropriate to ask these individuals as a potential candidate so that they would have the ability to do like to like. I would assume this is something more than just, hi, my name is, tell me about your personal life. This is a little bit higher level than that with the questions. And then you're right about the tour. They won't necessarily need the tour, but that opportunity to consider that individual as their next executive director, I think is an appropriate conversation for this to have. That was the spirit of it.
Are these, Shepro again, are they all coming at once or are they coming one at a time?
For the tour?
They would be one at a time for that
Got it.
portion. It'll probably all occur on the same day, but they would be
Yeah.
one at a time.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
No problem. Any other questions on this process and proposed timeline or tentative timeline? Okay. Well,
Could I ask Shepro? I
Uh-huh.
keep thinking of questions. Has preliminary work, I mean, obviously, I know the advisory committee considered, I think I was told that there were actually a total of over, like, something like 30 or 40 resumes that were actually received.
Yes, there were 31.
31. Has basic screening work already been done? Things like background or things like that, or is that awaiting later
background
process?
checks have not been done as far as I know. I know outside of the Health Advisory Committee members, Madam Chair, myself and Ms. Labrillo have all seen the 31 and had a chance to, just see what's there. And the list of 9 that was recommended last week to us is a very solid list out of that 31. And obviously all resumes can be made available to committee members, but we're starting with these 9.
Just to confirm, yes, we have not done any further research on the candidates beyond what the clinical advisory group provided. But if there is any research you'd like applied to all candidates prior to the next meeting of this committee, I'd be happy to take care of that.
Yeah, my question really was more directed at whether anything else had been done. It sounds like, I mean, I'm not saying it should have been, I'm just asking if it was.
Nope, this was it.
This was
We
it.
went over here is the process so far.
I was at the very tail end of the advisory committee meeting.
Yeah.
It appeared from some other emails that I had seen that the advisory committee in many cases did know many of the candidates and offered up whatever knowledge they had about that, which I assume will be reflected in the minutes and the discussion.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We're here to ask and get answers. I don't think we have a need for a closed session, right? To distribute the resumes. We're not discussing them today, so.
Correct. There should be no need for any kind of
Okay.
executive session since we're not discussing any specific individuals.
Okay. So then today, I just want you to all start thinking about questions that you think would be good to ask our candidates. They can range from anything to health related to management experience, anything. Let's put as many questions together as possible. And then out of those, select the best ones that will help us get the information that we need out of these candidates and these interviews that we will conduct. I know, Madam Chair, you and I spoke, I think in previous search committees, there were somewhere around 20 questions were asked. Was that it? You
I think
recall?
that's an awful lot.
Maybe like 15.
I think if we had 10 good ones
Oh.
during a half hour, open-ended as well as quick response, yes, no, short, defined answers. Say 15, and we may not get through 15. But that's a lot of questions to ask.
Yeah. So next week, when we get together, let's develop what those questions are. I will get some feedback from some staff members, health advisory committee members, if they have questions that they think would be good to add into the pile. And then we'll select which ones we would like to put together.
When,
So is,
I'm
sorry,
staff, what staff is that? Whose staff?
Well, if I can get any input from some of our union staff, that will be present, but I don't know.
Not on the questions that we would ask in our closed interview. We can certainly talk to the clinical advisory group and get recommendations on clinical type questions. And
I
then
think that's really more what I'm getting at is more clinical type questions. Not, other types of-
I would recommend that staff should not be asked these questions. This comes from the committee, the advisory committee, absolutely, because they're
Okay.
helping us with this. But no staff input. They will have their own questions.
Okay, we'll
That they'll
save
be
those for the
defining.
later portion.
Well,
with
that'll
the
be,
2 or 3 candidates.
that's
Yeah,
accurate.
okay. Sounds good.
Shepro again. So is the intent that we would limit the number of questions and everybody gets asked the same question?
Yes.
I don't know that I think that's,
No,
I
they're-
think that's too too constraining.
I think you can always have follow-up questions. Once you ask a question, if there's follow-up questions based on their answer, you can also have a couple of questions that, like if time allows, you get to and things like that. But your primary questions asked should be consistent among all candidates.
Yeah, and I think that's the same as it has been with the previous search committees, is there were a pre-selected range of questions that were asked to all candidates, and then any follow-up that was allowed at the end,
So
if there was time.
will these pre-selected questions be given to the applicants in advance?
No.
Seems to me that if everybody's being asked the same question and we want the best answers possible, wouldn't it make sense to give them the questions in advance? And that might save a lot of time.
Well, it could, but it also could just be another way for candidates to use that information in some way to change our perception rather than having them ask the question in the moment and see how they respond in that moment. But again, this is how previous search committees have done it. So I would like to stay in that similar type format. But again, set questions. If there's time, we can have it open-ended follow-up questions after.
The most frequent answer to anybody that asks in government why you do something is that we've always done it that way.
We can, this is Pirog, to your point. The very first round of interviews is what we're talking about right now with the potential 15 questions. When we bring back the final, if 3 are selected or 2, and we bring them back for their second round of interviews after being vetted by the other interviews that are the other process, and bring them back for their final round. Perhaps at that point, we can have several questions, much more detailed questions to be asked that they can have preparation for.
Yeah, I mean, Shepro, again, it seems to me that there could be some questions that we would benefit from having them know them, and they could turn out to be, disqualifying questions if the answers don't show and the experience level and so forth.
I'm not opposed to
We're
what you're
looking
saying
for-
right now, the
I'm
rationale.
not trying to lengthen the process. I'm just thinking that, I mean, I've been involved in, I guess, interviews for board members and appointed officials. And usually, each of those interviews takes sort of a different direction. We didn't ask everybody the same questions. A lot of questions came up based upon what their unique, credentials or issues were.
You are right. We were led, I mean, by the answers to each individual. So sometimes you went off, and that was very helpful sometimes.
At the same time, obviously, for an executive director position, there are going to be certain things that we are presumably going to demand of every applicant in terms of background, experience, and so forth. And that might be easily, I don't know the extent to which any of that has already been done. It sounds like, no, we haven't yet done that. And I'm not saying we should have, but that might be a way of short circuiting somebody's need to come in and, talk about. I know we had one interview where I think somebody had like an 8-page resume.
Dr. Silva, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would just like to briefly offer that we also approach this from a different perspective. And a question for me would be a little bit more detail on the demographic that we serve, as far as languages are concerned, and as far as ethnicity and culture would be important for me to know, as I would I really envision somebody with a good fit for the health department, with true leadership qualities, but also a true understanding of the diversity and the knowledge that is entailed with the populations that we serve in the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Great question. Great. That was great.
Thank you, Dr. Silva.
Absolutely.
Can I make a suggestion just of something that I've done in the past with high-level positions? You can present 1 or 2 questions to the candidates ahead of time and ask them to prepare a presentation or something of that nature to give during their interview. And if you highlight any areas that are of particular importance to you, that's a good opportunity for them to prepare and for you to see their preparation skills and their presenting skills. So it does offer another perspective. You would probably need to schedule a slightly longer interview and plan for an hour per person if you were going to do that. So you'd want to give them, you're going to have 30 minutes present on, your presentation on how you'll address underserved communities or something of that nature. So there's just another option of something I've done in the past. I've done it both ways, where you send them all the questions in advance, and when you don't, and you get a different side of the person. So you can always do a hybrid where they know some of the questions, but not all of them.
Okay, Tepe here.
Mr. Tepe.
Thank you. Let me see if I understand this. We're now on April 11th. On the 18th, we are going to select the questions that we want, as well as narrow it down to the 5 candidates we want to select to come back for interviews.
Correct.
Okay. Those candidates would have interviews on the 25th.
Yes, ideally, all of them.
Okay. And then on the 2nd, we would have the tour. Is that correct?
It would be the second week of May, just in case we have to do 2 meeting dates for interviews.
Okay.
Otherwise, it could be done the first week of May if we've completed the interviews.
Okay, so we need to spend a fairly decent amount of time on the 25th if we're going to conduct the interviews then, correct?
That's correct.
5 candidates.
Okay.
Madam
And
Chair? Oh, let's go ahead, Mr. Tepe.
Ms. Labrillo, do you have a suggested list of questions that we might want to review that have been used in the past?
I can certainly prepare that if you'd like that.
Well, if I don't know how long ago the executive director in this area had been selected, but it might be interesting to look at the questions that were used then.
I don't know if that record would still exist of the specific questions asked when I believe it's been since
Shepro,
Ms. Jeffers was hired.
Well, then, yeah, I'd be interested in looking at your suggested questions too.
Certainly.
Mr.
Thank you.
Shepro.
I was going to say, my recollection is Barb Jeffers was essentially succeeded to the position when Dr. Keener, I think, left. I think it's been a long time since there was any significant interview process for this position, such as we're talking about. And it does seem to me, clearly we need to get this done, but we've taken a long time to even get to this stage. And if this works, great, but I don't think we should say we have to cram all of this into a 30-day period after we've taken well over a year since the vacancy occurred. I can't think of an executive director position that's more important than in this current environment and maybe beyond it. And to Dr. Silva's point, I agree. I mean, what we are looking here is something that to me goes beyond technical competence. I think this position, in my mind, requires somebody with a vision and outlook that kind of goes beyond that. What is the goal of, in your mind, Ms. Candidate, of the health director? What is your mission? Is it carrying out what the State Department tells you to do? Just with the COVID vaccine, we've identified dramatically underserved communities. We've identified dramatically, I don't want to say uninformed, but where the information available seems to vary greatly. The facilities vary greatly. I think that we're all going to want to know, how are you going to change things if you are? What's the next mission of the department? And I think that, into Mr. Labrillo's suggestion, which I like very much, I think on some of those overarching issue, I would very much like to, in effect, give them that assignment and see what they have to say. That's not the kind of question I think I would like to just throw at somebody and expect a spur of the moment answer. In my other political life, I've discovered that some people express themselves very well if they have a chance to think about it. Some want more thought. Some are very glib. I like the idea of, I don't know whether you call it the essay question, but something that they have I know when we've selected a fire chief or a police chief, often they are given something in advance so that you get, in addition to their ability to answer questions on the spot, the sort of deeper and more perhaps substantive questions that you want more time.
Makes sense to me. I think it's a good idea.
But I guess to Mr. Teppi's point, it does sound like one of the key and possibly lengthy meetings, given Mr. Teppi's and my proclivity to ask lots of questions, might take a while.
Please don't include me in that group, Mr. Shepro.
I will be glad to exclude you. That'll save half the time. Thank you.
I meant the group that ask a lot of questions.
If I may, this is Pirog. If we are asking a candidate, then on the 18th, we're going to analyze the questions and define which of the candidates we're going to invite for that interview starting on April 25th. I'm just putting that out there. I don't have I'm not asking questions because I already know the answer. Will that give the candidate enough time to be thoughtful enough to be able to have a presentation prepared, a research presentation prepared for the meeting on the 25th?
Well, if that's the direction we're going to go, then we might want to wait 2 weeks and have the first interviews conducted on May 2nd.
I think that sounds like a more realistic
Yeah.
approach. I agree. This is, again, this is, well, I have enough said. I think
Yeah, if
I
that's-
agree
If
with
that's
that.
the direction we want to
Yeah.
go, it would make more sense to give a 2-week window in between meetings.
Mm.
So we'll consider this a viable idea unless there is anyone on the committee that objects to this. Then I
Why
think.
don't we
that's
make that, Tepe here, why don't we make that decision when we're, after we've determined that next week?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be more appropriate for us to determine next week, but it's already sounding like everyone wants to do that. So we'll talk, we'll pick it up next Monday. So, okay, I think we're good with that for now. We'll all start thinking about questions that we want to put together. And I would assume maybe the way that we could do this is when you have your questions to send them in to myself and Ms. Labrillo. I would say include Madam Chair, but that would create a potential open meetings
No.
issue. No, it wouldn't? Okay.
As long as we don't reply all, it should be
Yeah,
fine.
well, we could send it to Jane.
You don't
I would send
reply
them- I
all,
would
but
send-
you can send to all.
Yeah,
I would send to also to Jane.
yeah,
And Jane then can also then have a record of the questions.
yeah. Yeah, I know you would want to have a record. And then, so just send them in. Once you have them, we can start collecting them and see where we're at coming into next week's meeting. Speaking of which, what time would be agreeable to the committee to meet next week? Obviously, it's not going to be an interview portion. Would we want to stick with a later afternoon time like this or 9 a.m., our typical first meeting of the day time, something like that? Nothing-
Mr. Chair.
Nothing before 9, I will request.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Tepe, go ahead.
due to some personal situations I have, could we potentially meet at 10 a.m. on subsequent Mondays?
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem even on interview days. Is there any objections to a 10 a.m. start time from any members of the committee?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, so just try and keep
Thank
your
you. Mondays
Mondays open for the next month and a half. Okay, I think that's it. We don't
Do
really. have
we, I didn't see it and I probably could find it. Could we get copies of the actual job description that was
Yeah.
posted?
Yep.
Is that not included in the packet?
The packet is just the resumes right now, but I will get you an updated job description. I'll also update the timeline a little bit with some of these things that we're still working on and send that out as well.
And I agree, you need both.
And
Is that it?
I think that's it.
All right, if Shepro says that's it, I think we're good.
All right.
Unless are there any other questions or comments from the committee before we adjourn?
Well, Mr. Kenyon isn't here, so
I
I think
know.
we just have to keep meeting.
We got to keep going.
But I will offer a motion to adjourn if nobody has anything else.
I'll second.
Say,
All those in favor say aye.
aye.
All right, thank you for being here.
Aye.
See you next
Thank
week.
you.